also artistically challenging. An intricate montage of more than 300 animal sculptures is carved into the contours of the trunk. It's like a child's Find the Hidden Picture game scaled up to skyscraper size.
What we did was to sculpt the animals into a foam model of the tree. And that sculpting was done really kind of inspirationally, like what does that blob of tree remind me of? And, you know, gee, we don't have enough crabs on the tree. Let's do some crabs and that kind of thing. Very artistic, very much an aesthetic exercise.
Once the artists had done their work, the technical team took over.
Then we sectioned the tree off into little cubes, and each of those little cubes was scanned. And those scans were used to create giant metal and lath cubes, which were then helicoptered in and placed around the tree, and then they're welded together. And what you end up with is a metal cage replica, full size, of the little model that you had sculpted.
Artists spent the next 12 months, rain or shine, sculpting the network of animals. Applying a thin coat of cement to the wire framework, an artist would consult a batch of photos and begin to shape the soft concrete, racing to finish the animal's likeness in the 6 or 7 hours before the concrete hardened. Once the sculptures were complete, a year to the day after they were begun, the tree was painted a mottled brown and gray, and then topped with a protective clear coat to ward off ultraviolet fading. As huge and complex as the Tree of Life is, it's soon to be dwarfed, both physically and technologically, by Expedition Everest. Some of the trees on the African savanna are actually 30-foot tall southern live oaks, native to Florida. They've been given crew cuts to make them look like Africa's acacia trees. Modern Marvel's Walt Disney World will return in a moment. Dinosaurs have been roaming through Disney stories since 1940, when the animated movie Fantasia featured them fighting to the death.
For us, they really do fit into this balance of scientific and fantastic. We like to bring to life things that prior to going to a Disney theme park really only existed in your imagination or that you saw in a film. And a dinosaur fits that.
So in designing Disney's Animal Kingdom, it was only fitting to include dinosaurs. But as usual, the Imagineers decided to plus it.
They're some of the largest, smoothest, fastest creatures that anybody has ever made.
They owe their speed and motion to yet another advance in audio animatronic technology.
We went from a 500 psi hydraulic system on the older figures, or 100 psi pneumatic, to 3,000 psi. So that meant we could put smaller cylinders in. Because they're at higher pressures, they carry a much higher load. Plus, we had a compliance on all those figures, so we can get faster speeds, have smaller packages, and have them very fluid.
In Dinosaur, people journey back in time to capture an iguanodon, which, since this is Disney World, means a massive audio animatronic dinosaur. Disney's Imagineers wanted to create a thrilling sense of action, to make people feel like they were climbing boulders, dodging meteors, and getting stuck in the mud. The solution was to build the thrills into the ride vehicle itself.
We named it the EMV, the Enhanced Motion Vehicle. And this particular vehicle has a lot of capabilities. It has four-wheel steering. So right off the bat, you're not your typical truck.
The four-wheel steering allows for tight turns and quick maneuvering, which simulates driving through very rough terrain. The real action, though, comes from hydraulic actuators that move the car body itself, much like in audio animatronics.
What we have here is a motion-based vehicle that is actuated by 3,000 psi of hydraulic pressure. We have 100-gallon tanks that hold the hydraulic fluid, and from there it's sent out through hydraulic lines to the actuators themselves, controlled by the onboard computer.
We have the ability to perfectly coordinate the motions of the vehicle with things that are happening around the vehicle. So when something falls next to you and causes a little explosion, you can have the actual vehicle lurch as if it's reacting to the things around you.
The result is a thrilling race through time and space, dodging meteors and fierce dinosaurs. Hydraulic pressure provides the realistic motion in Dinosaur for both the vehicles and the creatures. For decades, it's been the best way to animate the inanimate. But when Imagineers decided to create the world's most realistic audio animatronic, they had to turn to new technology. The groundbreaking result is Lucky, the first free-roaming audio animatronic ever.
Lucky is a completely different type of technology than our in-ride audio animatronic creatures who technologically, their chief goal is to do the same thing over and over again forever and ever and ever, and the engineering is aimed at this idea. Whereas Lucky's chief goal is to react smoothly and convincingly and direct his attention to individuals so that they know that dinosaur's looking at me.
It's the biggest leap in AA since Lincoln first stood at the 1964 World's Fair.
To do this, we had to pretty much reinvent every way that we have created audio animatronics in the past. Since we wanted to free Lucky up from the ground, from the floor, and have him walk around the parks, we went with electric.
Disney employed carbon fiber technology, similar to that used in bicycles and airplanes, to create a strong, lightweight frame. And they formulated a new lightweight latex compound for the skin.
Because it's electric, we have to make sure that everything is lighter. That skin is what we call a latex foam, and it's a very lightweight structure skin, to where if we tried to use any of our other skins that we've used in the past, we couldn't, because the weight was too high and the electrical cylinders and motors wouldn't handle that load.
This is the first skin where the guest can walk right up to and actually touch. So the feel of the figure actually had to feel like what you would think a dinosaur would feel like.
Disney also came up with some innovative and highly proprietary software.
This is where we pushed the innovation beyond what anybody had done prior to us. This had to be operated by one person. Everything from an eye blink to walking to turning his head. All of those had to be controlled simultaneously in real time in front of guests. That actually is impossible. So to pull it off, we wrote a very sophisticated piece of software that actually co-puppets the figure with the human. So it's a human and a piece of software or a computer that is bringing Lucky to life whenever you see him out on stage.
The results are remarkably lifelike, even to the people who created him.
I kid you not, the team that works on Lucky take Lucky very seriously. They view this as a living creature. They ask how he's doing in the morning, how does he feel.
There's only one Lucky so far, and he's spending time in several Disney theme parks around the world. In the fall of 2005, he helped open Hong Kong Disneyland. One reason Walt loved his theme parks was because, as he put it, they would never be finished. They would always be evolving, improving, and growing. One of the most ambitious new attractions now taking shape is Expedition Everest, whose steel frame summit towers 199 feet above Disney's Animal Kingdom, more than 50 feet higher than the Tree of Life, and 10 feet higher than Cinderella Castle. Expedition Everest will contain a roller coaster thrill ride inside the mountain, and thus join Disney's long chain of roller coasters housed inside mountains. Space Mountain is the most famous, but the first was the Matterhorn at Disneyland. In fact, the Matterhorn made roller coaster history when it debuted in 1959.
Roller coasters originally were always made of wood, and it would have flat steel plates attached to the top of the wood and to the sides of the wood. This had to go inside a Matterhorn mountain. There was no way to do the conventional woodwork. What's the easiest thing to bend? Well, you know, you can bend electrical conduit pretty simple. They figured you could take pipe you could bend pipe, and then you could weld it together with ties between the rails. It was nothing more than a simple expedient of how to get this done easy. Voila, they accidentally invented the first of that type of roller coaster.
Since then, almost all roller coasters have been made of curved steel, allowing for tighter turns and faster speeds. Expedition Everest will be made the same way, but on a huge scale.
The roller coaster is a traditional gravity roller coaster. It uses a chain lift and very, very large motors to lift the train to the top of the mountain, where gravity then takes over, and we have all the stored energy of a train full of passengers at 100 feet in the air, and the amount of energy that large mass has at that height.
Creating a mountain to enclose a ride this huge is no easy task.
The mountain is a complicated structure. On the outside, it looks like a mountain. That's very nice. But in fact, it's three independent architectural systems. There's a rigid system, which holds up the concrete of the mountain and is, by definition, absolutely rigid. There's a flexible, dynamic system, which is the ride track, which, because this multi-ton vehicle is moving on it, that ride track has to move. But it can never touch the mountain. Those two systems can't touch each other, but they have to be built simultaneously, so the steel of one is actually penetrating through the steel of the other, and if you put one little piece of steel in at the wrong time, you've stopped your entire construction process.
We poured a very, very large mat foundation over an acre of concrete, over 3 feet thick, to spread the load of both of those two structures. And then we began the construction of the roller coaster and the exoskeleton, the mountain static structure, at the same time.
Further complicating things is a giant Yeti, the mythical guardian of the mountains.
The Yeti is so big that the Yeti is sitting on his own independent architectural structure that goes all the way to the footings of the building and cannot touch either the ride structure or the existing architectural structure of the mountain. And all of these things had to be simultaneously constructed because they're all big and you can't put one in after you've built the other one.
Disneyland's Matterhorn also features a Yeti, but the one at Expedition Everest will be both huge and incredibly nasty. For now, he's a closely guarded secret.
Our Yeti is gritty, real Yeti with, slobber and wet legs from walking in and out of the snow and matted dreadlock hair and, a real animal. An animal that you see for a very brief moment, but when you see it, you think, wow, was that really real?
Once Everest's basic structures were in place, workers began creating the rock work. Although this mountain is no more encased in rock than the Tree of Life is covered in bark.
The mountain structure is covered with over 5 acres of themed carved rockwork. The matrix of plaster that's carved to replicate as closely as possible the geological rock forms that you'd find in the Himalayas. From here, we're actually seeing some of the scaffolding on the exterior of the mountain. That scaffolding is used to provide access to the workers to install the lath, which is the matrix that the plaster is applied to, and then carve that plaster and then finally paint it.
Thousands and thousands of construction workers from Central Florida working on the project, and it's like conducting an orchestra.
After 3 years of construction, the mountain will finally be complete, and Expedition Everest will open to the public. At Disney, it's been said, no good idea is ever allowed to die. Expedition Everest seems to bear that out. It's another huge expansion on the theme park concept Walt first unveiled at Disneyland. A lot has happened in the 4 decades since Walt Disney first sketched out his idea for his biggest and most ambitious project ever. Walt Disney World is huge and complex in both its overall vision and its day-to-day operations. It's not exactly what Walt described to the world when the veil of secrecy was lifted from his mysterious Florida project. But it's the closest thing on Earth to a real-life embodiment of Walt's biggest, grandest, most magical dream.